All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy, GS Luke, here with our round 2 live stream for the WM Phoenix Open. Going to get you guys ready for all your lineups tomorrow with a look at the weather report, some of the averages out there from today, any of your questions down in the live chat, as well as some lineup construction thoughts, some shots gained metrics, all that sort of jazz that we typically go through to get you ready for all of your exposure for tomorrow. But hopefully you're having a fantastic Thursday wherever you are, and you're ready to talk some golf with us over here on the channel. The first thing I need you to do is to go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also subscribe to the SHIPIT channel if you haven't already, which if you're a sweaty tryhard and you aren't already subbed, what the heck are you doing? But we're trying to get to 10K subs over here on the SHIPIT Nation YouTube channel out there before the Super Bowl starts, which is a little bit of an ambitious goal. We've got to go and push after it over the next few days, but I know we got a lot of sweaties down here, a lot of people coming in playing Showdown over this time of the year. So go ahead, help a brother out over there with a subscribe. What's going on, Coach? Welcome on in. What's going on, Michael, as well, Alan, all of you sweaty tryhards already down there in the chat. And it was Blanton's that I had on the other day. So I had Eagle Rare the one night, Blanton's the next. Maybe because we're doing a stream later, Michael, we can bring out one of those two. But Eagle Rare and Blanton's are the two whiskeys that we've had on stream. What's going on, Derek? Welcome on in. And yeah, Camillo, that play you mentioned on my stream absolutely went off. Let's talk about some of the conditions that we saw from round number 1, which favored the AM wave over the PM wave. It was only about a 0.2 shot difference between each side, but it was significant. Maybe not massive out there between AM, PM, but it was a whole about 0.2 shot advantage. You still had guys like Wyndham Clark, Lee Hodges really get after it over there in the PM wave. In fact, your 3 guys that got to -6 or better were all from that side of tee times. But the first half, a lot of these -4, -5s are where you saw those players going off. So, this 0.2 shot advantage shows us that you don't have to go out there and only play AM wave guys. But if you're trying to go out there and parse between your player pool, right, trying to make some of those final decisions, and one of your guys is AM wave, one of them is PM wave, well, maybe you cut the guy that's PM wave if all things are equal. So that's really what I saw from the weather in round 1. And it looks pretty similar over there for Friday. So this is our HRRR model. It looks pretty cool for the first hour or so, but when it heats up, it's more so the winds kicking up around 3-4 p.m. They're going to make conditions get a little bit harder. And I think that main cause for the 0.2 shot difference was likely the greens firming up, not so much the winds being a factor. If we take a look at the observed winds from today in the morning, it looked just a hair calmer than what you had in the afternoon, but there was really only 2 hours where the wind kicked up here to 8 miles an hour, or was any different than what you had there in the morning. So I would say that the greens firming up is going to be something that happens all 4 rounds around here. And considering that the weather looks almost identical to Thursday, I would expect the same kind of split. So it's not the kind of situation where I'm going out there and only taking one side of the tee times, but it's also the kind of situation where I don't think you want to completely ignore the weather. In my projections that I post on my site, I'm likely going to have a 1, maybe 1.5 point bias towards those guys in the AM wave. And it's not so much that I think they're going to go out there and have a massive advantage. It's that when I'm going out there and I'm trying to break those ties in my optimizer, I'd rather have an AM guy than a PM guy. And, you could do it when you're hand building, going out there and maybe just favoring that side of it. Maybe when you're building your player pool, you go out there and do it that way. But another way to go out there and force in those sort of players is just to give them a little bit of an artificial bump. So that's something that I do in my process. Doesn't have to be the way that you go about it, but that's the way that I would look at the weather. And just for completion's sake, let's go through a few other models. The NEM looks a little bit more flat across the day, but still going to have the greens getting a little bit crunchier as the day goes on. Medio blue looks pretty flat, pretty calm the entire day. Icon model does have the wind gusts getting a little bit higher as the day goes on, but again, I'll stress a little bit as it's not that big a difference. And then GFS is also one of the more reliable models that we have, and it also looks relatively flat across the day. So I don't think it's the kind of slate where we're going to go in all in on one side or the other. More so want to look at the shots gained metrics, want to look at some round two historicals, guys that are due for a good day when it comes to their tee approach and all of that are going to be the kind of players that I'm looking for in my player pool. Just to go over to the stone, this of course is the main slate stone. If you're going to try and find some of those round two historical stats, try and find guys that have a good true approach delta, always useful to go over there and use the stone. So if you guys aren't already a subscriber over there on the SHIPIT Nation site, they make a lot of what we're about to do over here on the shots gained tab easier. They do a lot of the work for you over there on that spreadsheet. So rather than having to go through and parse all of these stats on your own, they're going to give you a lot of shortcuts to go out there and do so yourself. So the round two historicals, some of the you can use on top of that. If you want to know the tee times for players, so you can of course find them for everyone on their own over there on the PGA Tour site or on the spreadsheet that you're using for projections, it'd be real nice to have those on there as well, which of course is also a part of the SHIPIT Nation stone that they have there for Showdown. So it's not quite done out there for round two quite yet, at least as of the round just coming to an end here. Still a few more groups that have to finish their round in the morning, but play ended up finishing up about 10 minutes before we went live here. I would imagine the next hour, maybe hour and a half is when you'll see that round two stone posted. So it's good for the tee times, great for the round two historical and all that. But especially to help you out in shortening the process when going through these stats. Let me get a sip of my iced tea over here. We got an Arizona iced tea that we're sipping on. So not quite to the bourbon that I might be having a little bit later, but decided to make it an Arizona iced tea because, of course, they're in Scottsdale, Arizona. So keeping it a little bit, what's the word for it? Themed over here on the channel. You only got one lineup with Camilo, but hey, that's one more than me. So good stuff there. You're going to try it. Yeah, it's some good stuff. I'd highly recommend that Eagle Rare. Stevens, Van Rooyen, and Spawn need to step up their game. You hope my lineups are doing better. Yeah, I'm doing great. At one point today, I was 10xR away. I was in second place in the large field GPP, but you've got a long way to go. Just like I'm winning money right now, that could go to complete shit tomorrow. And if you're losing money in your GPPs, day two could be really good for you. So, I'm not going to sit here and claim that I'm going to have a great week. We'll have to see how it plays out, right? Was there any advantage to starting on the front or the back nine? Great question. So we'll have to go over here to Data Golf to give us our answer. And it doesn't really look like there's a massive advantage to be had. I would say maybe starting on the back nine. And the only reason I say that is the easiest stretch of holes was this back nine here. So 17, 18 are birdie holes, or at least with the round one pin locations. And then hole one had about a 14% birdie rate, but 8, 9, 10, 11, right? There's not many birdies being made on that portion of the golf course. There wasn't really an advantage, I would say, is the correct answer to your question. But if you had to parse it, maybe the back nine, but I think that would be really stretching it if we went that far. Let's see. You have you make your own tee. That's probably even better. I'll admit that. Let's go through some shots gained metrics. So before we talk about some lineup construction and actually putting together lineups, worth noting what actually happened out there today. And if you take a look at the shots gained ball striking, there's a familiar name at the top. He shot -2. He's the world's best player, and he gained nearly 5 strokes between his approach play and off the tee. Now, about 2 of those came on one shot when he holed out for eagle on hole number 10. But even regardless of that shot, still had an excellent round out there with his irons. Gained off the tee, and surprisingly, lost strokes with the putter, which if you know anything about his track record around TPC Scottsdale, you know that he's one of the best putters in this field when it comes to historical shots gained. So even though he's not the most consistent putter that we have out there in tour, at this golf course in particular, he's been a lot better than what we saw for round number 1. So the issue with Scotty, of course, is going to be the ownership, where for main slate, he was 60 to 70% owned in some of those contests. Higher owned than I projected, that's for sure. Over there on my site, I don't think anyone had him in that 70% range when it came to their ownership. For Showdown tomorrow, because he had such a good ball striking day, again, 5 strokes between off the tee and on approach, he's probably going to be well over 50% owned, even at $12,800. So if you didn't see the price tag, he is a lot more expensive than what he was for main slate, but I don't think that's going to keep people off of him because the pricing is in general a little bit softer than what you have for main slate. So obviously Scotty Scheffler is the exception to that rule, right? He got priced up compared to where he was for main slate. A lot of your other guys in this 8, 9, and 10K range are a little bit cheaper than where you had for the main slate. So just to give you a few examples, let's go over here and just sort this by DraftKings salary. These are your main slate salaries that we have here on the right. JT was $10,500. Hideki down here was $10,200. For tomorrow, JT is $300 cheaper, and Hideki Matsuyama is I think, was it $200 cheaper than what he was for main slate. So that's pretty much the case for everyone in the field, not named to Scotty Scheffler. So you might think that that's going to keep the ownership lower, but these ball striking stats, that 5 shots gained between those two categories, is going to keep enough people on them where if you're going to go and take that ownership game, that game theory game, I think it's best done on a showdown format. I think over 4 rounds, it's hard to fade somebody like Scotty that has the track record he has around here. But from the showdown perspective, where you've got to have the absolute nuts to make the optimal lineup, people will leave a lot more salary on their showdown lineups than what they will on main slate. Getting that leverage off of Scotty is a little bit easier to do, in my opinion, in this kind of format. There's more variance. There's a lot more volatility when it comes to playing only 18 holes as compared to 72. So even though he looks absolutely foolproof, I think there's a really good argument to be made to go out there and not play him out there in round 2 showdown. I think it's easier to do if you're well over the field on Scotty, like somebody like myself. But even if you're not, even if you faded them for your main slate, don't feel like you have to go out there and use them, because you're going to have plenty of other players towards the top to go out there and play that had equally impressive performance when it came to their shots gained ball striking. So just to go through the list, Kurt Kitayama would be one of those players as well. Gained about 5 strokes out there between approach and off the tee, and lost a stroke over there with the putter. Akshay Bhatia, really good day, especially on approach. Over 2.5 shots that he gained to the field there. A little bit better with the putter, but it's not like he putted way up over his head. Same thing with Lee Hodges, was really good in those 2 ball striking categories. Didn't putt way above his head. All these guys towards the top, really none of them putted their ass off today. I could see going right back to out there for tomorrow. And I think my favorite play out of all of them is the one that you guys have no idea about. And that's this Jose Luis Ballester Barrio. He's the U.S. Amateur champion from last year. I didn't know this, by the way. I was only made aware of this yesterday on my live stream that I did on my channel. But look at this. He gained 1.5 strokes off the tee, gained 2 strokes on approach, and lost nearly 3 strokes putting. The reason why this isn't a fluke, he's not like just some random Corn Ferry guy that goes off and has a good round. This guy is a U.S. Amateur champion. He's one of the top 5 college golfers that you have in the entire world. The kind of guy who's top 5ing or winning almost every event that he plays on the NCAA circuit. Also the kind of guy that didn't luck sack with the putter today, right? The short game, kind of like a Scotty Scheffler. It's crazy that that's the comp that we have for this kid, but he gained a bunch of the ball striking and then lost with the short game, like you have there with Scotty Scheffler. I think you could argue watching Scotty today that he left a lot out there on the golf course. That means that this Ballester kid that's even par currently hasn't finished his round. He still has 2 holes left to add on to the shots gained record right here. This is the kind of play that I'm looking to for a round 2 showdown. He's going to have the early tee time tomorrow. He's going to be one of the first few groups off because he's going to be finishing his round and going right back out there. Actually, he won't be one of the first few groups off, but he'll have an early enough tee time if that's the thing you're looking for tomorrow, and the ball striking metrics to go out there and boot. Let's go through a few other guys on here. Wyndham Clark had a really good approach day. Did gain a bunch of the putter, but that's kind of his MO. He's one of the best putters that you have out there on tour. So from the shots gained perspective, I think he checks a lot of boxes. Grazerman did his thing out there and approaching with the off the tee play as well. Unfortunately, and this has become a trend for Grazerman over the last few events, he lost 3 strokes with a putter, which last year would have been blasphemous. He gained about a stroke per round on the PGA Tour last year. In fact, in terms of shots gained, was the number 2 putter that you had in the world. Now losing, and this is routinely, it's not even like this is the first time that it happened. Last time out, he lost over 2 strokes with the putter in 2 of the 4 rounds. And the week before that, he had a couple rounds where he did that as well. So I'm not sure if it's the POA that's really throwing him off. It's overseeded POA this week, so it's a little bit different than that bumpy POA that you have there at Pebble or at Torrey Pines, where it's a little bit different than what you have with this POA Trivialis. But even on this POA Trivialis, I thought it might have just been that POA Anua that was really throwing him off. he's still on that struggle bus. So red flag has officially been raised over there on a Grazerman, but a lot of what we've said, he really hasn't gone there for us in Showdown for quite some time, which is disappointing because he continues to be an absolute striper from tee to green, and for whatever reason has lost his superpower. He's lost his fastball out there, and without that, he's not going to go out there and shoot us those -4, -5s that we're looking for. But I would say that he's a sleeping giant, the kind of guy that if he can get back to it putting, I mean, could have a massive, massive day because he's doing everything and more out there from tee to green. Jake Knapp, really good round one, especially when it came to the iron play. Pavon continues to be a little bit sneaky there. Gained a bunch of strokes off the tee. Really balanced tee to green performance from a Taylor Moore. In fact, gained across all 4 stat categories. So, his -6 rounds looks relatively sustainable from day to day. Now, he's not going to go out there and shoot -6, -7 again. Like that's highly unlikely with the Taylor Moore. But this kind of stat profile, if you're looking to play somebody in cash down there in that 7K range, like he's the kind of guy I'm looking at, because even if he doesn't go out there and gain 5-6 strokes to the field, him going about average or gaining 1 or 2 strokes to the field feels very reasonable for a player that played that well across all 4 stat categories. Now, just to isolate it on approach, I like taking a look at guys that were throwing darts. So maybe players that weren't showing up when we were looking at tee to green. You had, I guess we didn't point out Akshay or Billy Horschel before, but their iron play looks really good. Worth noting that Horschel will be in AMT time. So again, maybe the slightly better side of things, not something I'm really, focusing in on, but it's nice to see that he hit the ball well and then lost about 2 strokes of the putter. He's normally a lot better on these greens around TPC Scottsdale. A few other players worth noting, you got Gary Woodland, gained over 2.5 strokes off the tee. Joe Highsmith, Rasmus Højgaard, also Christian Bezainhout for some of your better iron players that you had in the field. And while some of them will be popular, like a Højgaard, even Bezainhout will get some attention. Guys like Bhatia, Clark, Scotty, we know for sure, right? He's going to be 50-60% owned. Some of the guys that are a little bit lower owned towards the top end of this list are the players that I think are especially in play. So like a Joe Highsmith, he's not going to be a super popular play. Like Gary Woodlands, because he's T44, it's not like he played terribly with that -1 round, but he's not going to get as much steam as some of the other guys around him. By the way, I still think Billy will get some ownership because he was pretty chalky for main slate this week. He got way more steam than I was expecting over there in my ownership projections. He was like 15 to 20% owned over there in some of those GPPs. So even though he didn't have the best round one, people looking at the shots gained metrics are probably going to play a Billy Horschel. So he's going to be, I would expect, in that like 10% range, maybe plus or minus 1-2% in either direction for a Billy Horschel, which still makes him a play. But guys like Highsmith, you could be looking at sub 5% ownership on. So if you're looking to take a pure pivot, a pure punt towards the bottom end of the board, like I prefer the guys like Highsmith or a Ballister Barrio, like we were mentioning before, over just a random shot in the dark. Like I'd rather make it somebody that was striping it with their irons the first day that has something to actually lean into in round number 2. Because we have a full field event here, 132 players. There's no need to just be rolling the dice on random players. Like if it's for pure ownership, and I guess if you're in the 150 max large field GPP, maybe there's a time and spot to do that with a few guys towards the bottom end of your lineups. But if you're playing in a 20 max single entry higher dollar GPP, have a reason for taking your guys down low. And it doesn't have to be their approach play. You can be looking at off the tee play. You can look at round 2 historical, like we mentioned over here on the Stone. Just have a process in place to go out there and find those players, and you'll find a lot more long-term success. You always want to refine your process. You always want to make it better over time. But it's always better to have a process, stick to it, and try and refine it over time than to go out there and just blindly gamble and hope that you get things right. That's the one thing I would say to avoid out there in your process. Let's go through some shots gained metrics of the putter. So guys that lost a bunch on the greens, that might be due to go out there and rebound tomorrow. So Kevin Kisner did gain over there with the irons, but lost over 3 strokes putting. And if there's any part of his game that should be good at this point, it would be the putter. So a little bit of a surprise there. Already talked about Grazerman before. A Lucas Glover lost a bunch of strokes putting. Heading into this event, his putter had been absolutely on fire. So, he's a very sketchy putter. Who else to be mentioned with the sketchy putter? Scotty Scheffler, right? He lost whatever it was, like 2 strokes putting as well out there in round number 1. Like, it's not like we're going to think he's going to go out there and gain 3-4 strokes with a putter. But if Glover's even an even putter and then is better from tee to green like you'd expect, it could be that -3, -4 round that we're hoping for. So, these kind of guys that are super into the negative over here, you would expect them to be a little bit better tomorrow. That's the idea by potentially looking to them in lineups. Tom Hoge, by the way, I'm not sure if you guys saw the video. He missed a 7-inch tap in today and left it short with his tap in putt. He walked up just, nonchalantly trying to tap it in with the back of his putter and hit it 5 inches instead of the 7 that he needed. So yeah, this probably looks a little bit worse than it probably should because of that putt. But even then, he wasn't making anything today. So maybe he makes a few more tomorrow. Eric Van Rooyen, he's in a few of my best GPP lineups right now. So it would be awfully great if he could figure out the flat stick tomorrow. Ricky Fowler, Luke Clanton's in a lot of my top lineups as well. And he's one of the few anchors I have in some of my top lineups. So these kind of guys that lost a bunch of strokes putting, you can see a few examples there that I'm hoping turn it around. Not the worst idea to target out there in Showdown. Just like I mentioned with maybe fading Scotty Scheffler, because it is only an 18-hole sample size, guys that didn't have the best round number 1, don't condemn them, right? It's not the end of the world if they didn't have their best stuff. Just because somebody didn't have the best approach day, didn't have the best off-the-tee play, doesn't mean that they're unplayable. It was only an 18-hole sample. Guys wake up sometimes and just don't have their best stuff. Don't be somebody that overreacts to the first 18 holes. That would be another thing I'd say out there for your process is try and forgive and forget a little bit, especially for round 2 Showdown. Rounds 3 and 4, it can be a little bit more nitpicky, especially round 4 when we have a 54-hole sample size at the course. But after just 18 holes, I mean, the PM wave today, it played a little bit harder. So if your guy blew up in the afternoon today, maybe don't hold it against him as much, particularly if it was the putter that was holding them back. Another category that's due for a lot of regression would be the around the green play. So guys like Paul Waring, who, by the way, I played some Waring this week. He's a really good player coming over from the DP World Tour. Won one of their signature events over there. Also the kind of guy that's like a top 10 machine, ball striking machine coming from overseas. So he lost a bunch with his short game, 3 strokes around the green, almost 2 at the putter. Like maybe you take him for a little bit of a bounce back. But the same thing we said about the guys with the putter, if they're the kind of guy that grades out well, but they just didn't have the best Thursday, and they're a guy that lost a bunch in either of these 2 short game categories, maybe that's where you give them a little bit more of a leash. So for example, like a Max Homa had a really bad short game. He also lost 3 strokes with the approach play though. So he looks a little bit broken, but if he goes out there and he fixes his ball striking, maybe the short game goes his way this time around. So, he's the kind of guy that if I was in a 150 max, one of those large field GPPs, maybe I use it super low ownership. It's not the safest play. That's why I wouldn't use them in cash or in one of my higher dollar single entries, that sort of thing. But if it's like the big $5, that sort of thing for Showdown, then, that's the kind of guy that usually makes my player pool, because it's hard to think that he's going to lose that many strokes when it comes to the short game. Guys like an Austin Eckroat fell under the same kind of spell. And you already mentioned guys like Joe Highsmith before as well. Let me see if there's any specific players you guys want me to go through, and then let's keep this thing going. Yeah, good first round. I agree with that. Where did we leave off? Got a bunch of questions, it seems like, so we'll catch up on those here. By the way, if you guys have any players you want me to deep dive, just let me know. We'll go through those. He did. So did Scotty Scheffler, right? Had the psycho scorecard, as some would call it. It's good for Showdown purposes, good for DraftKings scoring, not so much for trying to win the golf tournament. What players had the worst ball striking days? Good question. So let's show you that list. Guys that had atrocious days when it came to the ball striking. Brendan Todd, who's been in a really cold stretch lately, almost feels like he's injured or something because he's playing that poorly. Frankie Sapin, Patrick Rogers, ooh. Tom Hoge, ooh, really bad when it came to the ball striking. All these guys that you see listed here in red. So Ramey, Thurston Lawrence, Mac Meissner, Taylor Montgomery, who's dealing with some injury concerns of his own. All guys that you might want to think twice about playing. So Tom Hoge, I know we mentioned like the putter before, right? He looks kind of broken with the ball striking, which I think is a much bigger red flag than what you had out there with the putter. Now, it's worth giving the disclaimer on some of these guys that lost a bunch with the ball striking that, once again, only 18 holes. So if you're in that large field GPP, if you need to find a super low owned player, like guys like Patrick Rogers, Tom Hoagie, I wouldn't be playing a whole bunch of them. That's for sure across my set of 150 lineups. But there's a time and a place for these or he could players. DGen75, my good buddy will always say, or he could on guys that had a really, really shitty round, like these +5, +7s that you would never think could go out there and shoot -4, -5. I've seen crazier things happen over these years. Like I've seen guys go out there and completely turn it around. So don't completely condemn those guys towards the bottom. Is he from Arizona? So I'm not sure who you were asking about, but you could let me know. I think you mean Sapin, right? If you mean Sapin, he is. The amateur struck a 200-yard golf shot to 9 feet. He's a baller. Yeah, dude. I didn't know about him much before yesterday, but everything I've heard now that I've looked more into him, looks like an absolute stud. Only guys who got right today were Bez and Pavon. Hey, that means round 2 can only be up for you. So best of luck out there tomorrow, bro. Will Bez go low again? I have to say the shots gained metrics don't look terrible, Michael. He was good on approach today, which is kind of what we're looking for. And he played really well in round 4 last week. So I would say he's moving in the right direction. Does he go as low as today? Probably not. Shooting -5 would be really hard to back up. But does he have a -1, -2 in him? He could if he goes out there and hits it like he did. Akshay is a beast. How did Harman do today? Good question on Harman. I got to say with Akshay, by the way, he's one of my favorite players out here. So I got to agree with that. I could spell his name right and make him a little bit easier to find. He was fantastic with the ball striking. Gained about 4 strokes between the off the tee and approach. Nothing to complain about there. You're thinking about playing both Højgaards. I played Nico this week. So Rasmus was a little bit too highly owned for me, but if I show you their shots gained profiles, they looked really good, especially Rasmus. He gained about 2 strokes over there in approach. Nikolai, who I played out there in my lineups, gained 6 strokes putting. So I'll just tell you right now, Nikolai never does that. He is not the best putter that we have out here. So I'm not going to be playing him in Showdown tomorrow. There's just no way after that kind of performance. But Rasmus, who I didn't play for main slate, looks like a little bit of a better Showdown play. So he's going to cost you more. He's probably going to be higher owned than Nikolai as well. But from the stat perspective, I would say that he sets up pretty well. JJ Spawn lost 4 strokes off the tee. Yeah, he did. He screwed me too because his iron play was great. I had him for an over 12.5 greens today, and that bastard only ended up hitting 12 because of all the really terrible tee shots. I mean, he had 2 water balls, so it's impossible to hit a green regulation after you take a penalty drop. And then he also had a few shots where he had to lay up out of bunkers. So I would say that he's probably going to have some sort of regression there, right? Even if he's an even off the tee, that's going to set him up well going forward. And he has really good form heading into this event. So I think he's a decent option. Your boy Glover exploded today. Indeed, he did. The shots gained metrics didn't look too pretty either. Should have went more Clark, like I said. Yeah, that's one of the things I got right this week. I've got to say, decent ROI so far, but I need some guys like Eric Van Rooyen to get this thing going. So yeah, Clark's one of the real big bright spots I had for sure. Let's see. Homa. Oh, yeah. He looked like he was down on himself today. I know the shots gained metrics looked terrible too, but the eye test was probably even worse for Max. You'd be warning me about Siwoo, but you keep going back. Hey, it worked today, right? Didn't he have a pretty low round out there for Siwoo? The only thing I say about Siwoo is he's hard to trust over 4 rounds. And what, did he like fall apart or something? So when I was watching his round, yeah, he was like -2 and then, oh no. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I thought he had a good round. He had it going for a little bit, right? And then fell off. Maybe he does it tomorrow. He's a little bit hot and cold, that's for sure. Homa keeps this up, he's gonna be homeless. Yeah, he looks like he's mentally fatigued out there too. Poor guy. What do I think about Ann with the course history being top notch? Decent round 1, and can he keep it up? So the course history, that's always nice to have. Let's take a look at the shots gained metrics. So he gained off the tee, he gained on approach, he gained across all 4 stat categories, and nothing really carried his game, which, if it was gaining 2 strokes across the board like Taylor Moore did, that would be even better. But the thing that's great about Benny Ann not having that kind of performance is he's not going to be mega chalk, because this kind of stat profile, if he had shot -6, I mean, he'd probably be 20-25% owned. But in that 9K range, I think he's like high end of the 8K range over there for Showdown tomorrow. with this kind of balanced stat profile, he's the kind of guy I'll gladly go back to. If he was carrying himself with the putter around the green, it might be a little bit of a red flag, but yeah, I think there's a good chance he does keep it going. Homa the amateur. Oh, he might be an amateur soon if he continues to play like this. You had no clue Straka had a 400-yard drive in him. Yeah, so they showed it on the ESPN Plus coverage. It hit the cart path 5 times. So that was quite the drive that he ended up with there. By the way, guys, if you haven't hit that like button already, go ahead and smash it. And like I said, we're trying to get to 10K subs here on the channel before the Super Bowl. So go ahead and smash that subscribe button if you guys haven't either. Yeah, can I deep dive Harman? Sure. So he looked pretty decent across the board as well. He gained in 3 of the 4 categories. He gained over a stroke on approach, which is the main category that we're really honing in on. And the only loss was around the green, and he's one of the best around the green players that we have in the world. So I would say that that's probably going to be at least a neutral out there tomorrow. And if he continues the rest of his game, that's another decent round, another solid round over there in your showdown lineup. So I would say that this kind of stat profile is nothing but a green flag really across the board. And he's not my favorite course fit. The only thing I don't like about Brian Harman here is he's got a little bit of a lower ball flight on these firm conditions. I don't know if I like him as much, but it does help him off the tee. He lacks a little bit of distance, which is nice to have around this course. But because he's super accurate and the greens are running out this week, he's getting some extra roll out there. So maybe he's not the worst course fit. Maybe that's why he ended up having the really solid first round. But I think stat-wise, you've got a green light there from me. Does Hoffman have the bounce back? I sure hope so. He's one of the few guys that I would really benefit from having a bounce back. Lost nearly 3 strokes off the tee, and the rest of his game was positive. So I would say that there's a good chance that he has a bounce back in him because the game was put together. He putted better than he has the last few weeks. He wasn't quite an amazing approach player. Like he's averaging about a stroke gained per round on approach over his last 24 rounds. So he could improve there a little bit. He obviously needs to improve off the tee, but it was 2 water balls that really sunk him today. So kind of like a Matt McNeely. Matt McNeely shot -1. So he had an even better day despite those 2 water balls off the tee. A Hoffman, if he doesn't suffer that same kind of fate, is shooting something like -1, -2. And if not even better, if he's gaining off the tee. So I would say that there's a good case for it. Good to know he'll most likely come back down. Yep, for sure. Hoffman at 1,000-1 get on it. Yeah, I don't know about that. Almost looks like he doesn't want to be out there for Homa. I agree with that. All right, let's go through some lineup construction. So if you have any other players you guys want me to deep dive, feel free to go ahead and let me know. But let's go through a few other players down here in the chat. Well, I guess some lineup construction, more players if you guys want me to in the live chat. So in terms of lineup construction, I'm mostly worried about ownership for tomorrow. This isn't the kind of slate where I'm only playing AM guys. It's not the kind of slate where you have to worry about placement points like we do during Sunday. So kind of like our main slate lineups, we're mostly just making sure that we have the leverage necessary depending on the kind of contest we're entering. And we got to make sure we're not going to duplicate ourselves as well. So if you're in those large field GPPs, ownership is really going to be at the forefront of our process. Whereas if we're in cash, we really could care less about who we're playing in terms of our ownership. Now, if you're in a single entry, a smaller field GPP, that's kind of where you're in the middle of those 2 kind of extremes on either side. That's where ownership matters a little bit, but it's not the end all be all. So for the sake of this lineup construction segment, we're going to go through the large field GPPs and what I'm thinking about in terms of getting different in one of the big field contests. Reason for that is that it's more interesting to go through that side of it, because if we were playing a single entry, that sort of thing, we're not going to have to get nearly as different as what we would for one of those larger field contests. So just for the sake of really kind of pushing it here, we're going to play Scotty Scheffler at $12,800. So we're really going to spend up the board to go ahead and force that in, which is going to make us get different towards the bottom end of the board. And it's also going to force us down into that 6K range. So for our second man in, I'm going to try and find another guy that was popping with the shots gained metrics. And just going through it on here, there's not a lot of guys towards the top that really fit that description. But at Benny Ann, I know we pointed him out as a potential play. If you wanted to go back to Akshay, I could see that as well, because he was just across the board from tee to green, really checking the boxes. So let's start with the Scheffler there. Let's go with a Batia as our second man in. Third man in, we're going to go with the top end of the 7K range player. In terms of the shots gained metrics, I kind of like the idea of a Glover, especially since we're in the large field GBP, and a sub 5-7% owned player is really going to go a long way. So this is where we're going to start to get a little bit different. So Scheffler is going to be 50% plus owned. We know that ahead of time. Akshay here, I would imagine around 15 to maybe even 20% owned over there in GBPs. So that's really where a lot of our ownership and chalks coming in. Our last 4 spots is where we're going to make sure that we have the leverage to move up our lineups, as well as to make sure we're not going to duplicate ourselves. So we got Glover in there. Next man in, let's throw in, let's see. I haven't built my player pool yet. I haven't built any lineups yet. So this is why this is taking a little bit more thought. Let's throw in a Charlie Hoffman there at +2. In Showdown, I could see him shooting something like -3, -4, especially with the kind of stat profile that he had today. That puts us at 67.5 remaining for our last 2 spots. Let's throw in, if he really wanted to get crazy, we could go with the Patrick Rogers, but we don't have to be that outside the box with it. Let's go with McCarty, the hometown kid. And then for our last man in, we can't build a whole lineup here together. That's against the DraftKings terms of service. But as long as you're not taking Taylor Moore as your last man in, I feel extremely confident that you're not going to duplicate yourself. And if you extend that to somebody like an Adam Schenk and a Putnam down there at $6,600, you don't take any of those guys that are like -5 or -6. There's almost no chance that any of those permutations without those players is going to be duplicated in the large field GBP. The reason you say that is you've got a sub 10%er in Glover, maybe even sub 7% ownership, sub 5%er in Charlie Hoffman, sub 6%, I guess, to be a little bit more conservative about that. And then McCarty is probably going to be sub 3% owned over there in GBPs. You've got all the product ownership you need to offset right there, like a sub 3%er and sub 5%er, and then another guy is sub 7%. That's going to offset all of the chalk that you have up top. So that's why I say, like, no matter who you take, as long as it's not one of those players, you'd probably get away with it. Even if you took a Taylor Moore, even if you took, let's say, a Schenk or a Putnam as your last man in, you might get away with it in the large field GBP. You're still probably going to have a low chance of being duplicated. The leverage, it's going to be a little bit harder to come by, but you still have 3 spots that you're really getting different against the field on. And if 2 out of those 3 go out there and shoot us something like -3, -4, you're going to be at a really good spot in those large field GBPs. So, if this was a single entry, I would have no issues at all by using somebody like a Moore, a Schenk, a Putnam as my last man in. This is more so for the large field GBPs where it becomes more of a question. So, in that kind of lineup, that's where I'd be siding more towards like a Thor Bjornsson in that kind of lineup. Heck, even like a Fishburne there at $6,700. That's probably what I would use to round off that kind of lineup. And part of it's the ownership with those 2 players, but it's also the fact that guys like Fishburne, Thor Bjornsson were on my radar heading into the week. High ball hitters that are high birdie percentage players are what I prefer. And I know you have guys like Gim that played better. Your -5, -6ers that we already mentioned that are going to be a little bit more popular in general. A lot of people would rather go that direction, but let me remind you again, it was an 18-hole sample size. Golf is the most variant sport that we have in existence. If you're making all these big overreactions after just a 1-day sample size, you're asking to go out there and get kicked in the nuts. So that's why I'm still sticking to my guns, trying to take the guys that projected and modeled well heading into the week, and why I would rather go in that direction out there in the large field GBPs. So hopefully it gives you a decent idea out there with the lineup construction. Not so much for a lineup to go out there and tail. Again, this is just more so to give you guys the thought process out there for tomorrow and what you should be thinking about when you're going out there and clicking names. So let me see it in the chat if there's anyone we need the deep dive. If not, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Of course, Logan, appreciate the comment. What's going on, Jay Grimes? Deep dive Damon for you, of course. Thank you for the please, by the way. One of the kindest chatters that we've had out there. So lost 1.5 strokes on approach, but gained off the tee. So I would rather him have a better iron day, but heading into this event, he has been a lot better with his irons. So just to show you that, I would say that there's a little bit of optimism here. He's usually a lot better with the iron play. So if you take a look at his last few events, like last time out, he gained 3 strokes at the Farmers, pretty decent per round over there at the Amex, did lose at the Sony Open, but also gained almost 3 strokes over there at the RSM Classic. So this is the kind of player that his true approach delta over there on the Stone is going to be massive, because in round 1, he didn't have his best stuff, but he's normally gaining like close to 3/4 of a stroke per round on approach. So his true approach delta is going to be massively positive. So I would say that he's got a good chance to go out there and have a good round 2 because he's due for some statistical regression. So just another reason to go out there and use the stone is to get you on guys like Joel Damon that I think set up pretty well because the rest of his game was there. It's just the iron play was a little bit lower than what we're used to seeing, which, I think he's a decent bounce back candidate. He's been playing really well recently. How much do I consider round 2 history? So personally, it's a part of my process, but not a massive part. But I know a lot of people out there that use it as a big part of their process, and I don't want to knock it. I know a lot of people out there that round 2 historical is one of the main things that they look for, and it helps them get onto a lot of good plays. So it might not be my favorite thing to use, but it is a part of my process, that's for sure. You mean Vegas top 5 isn't a smart bet? Yeah, you remember on the live stream. Good guy, but I'm not sure I bet on him. That's for sure. Appreciate that, Kevin. Thank you. What stats do I consider the most at this course? So I'm looking at birdie or better percentage. I'm looking at par 5 scoring. Those are self-explanatory. I want guys that make a ton of birdies, especially for Showdown. So par 5 scoring at this course, that's where you generate a lot of your birdie looks. That's the reason for that. And then regular birdie or better percentage, always good to look at as well. Last 24 rounds is what I've been doing for a lot of my stats recently. And then if you're talking about the shots gained metrics like we have up here, shots gained ball striking is the number one thing for me because how you're hitting the ball is the most sustainable part of golf day to day. And that's your off the tee play. So how you're driving it, and then also your approach play, how you're hitting your irons. So ball striking, and then I'm looking at some longer term stuff. So not from round number 1, that'd be your birdie or better percentage, and also that par 5 scoring. That's all I've got, guys. Appreciate you guys stopping by, showing all the love that you guys do on these live streams. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Subscribe as well so we can get close to that 10K mark over there for SHIPIT. And best of luck with all of your exposure for round 2. Let's try and take down a GPP or 2. I hope to see a lot of your names up there towards the top end of the leaderboard. And let's get it over there for Friday.